Hey everyone, in this video we're going to make a 303 lead acid sound using Sylenth 1. And it's going to sound like this. So let's go ahead and make it. First I'm going to delete this one, and then I'm going to go ahead and pull in a new version of Sylenth 1. This is just the tool that I know the best for making these sorts of sounds. You can apply the principles to any other synth that you know how to use well. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the preset. So we've just got the default sound. So let's have a listen. Cool, so just a clean saw wave. So first thing we'll do, we'll turn the arpeggiator on, and I'm going to go ahead and use the pattern I used in that example. So we'll set that to 10. Turn the glide on, we'll set that one to 12, we'll turn the glide on, we'll set that one to 13, and we'll turn the glide on. Okay, so that's the first sequence of the pattern, and that's on page 1. So if you go ahead and click page 1, it swaps over to page 2. We can set this one to 10, glide, this one to 12, and glide. So now we've got this. Cool, so that's a 1/8 pattern, and it's not playing the note steps yet. So we come in here, we turn the mode, we turn it to step sequence. Cool, so now we can come in here to the timing and we can change it to 1/16. Cool, all right, so another parameter that we can control in here is the gate. Maybe we'll play with that, maybe we won't. Gate at 50% is just fine. So we've got the arpeggiator sorted. Next we'll come over to the octave and we'll figure out whether we're in the right octave. So if we drop that down, 1 octave, that's how it sounds, another octave. Cool, so I'm going to drop it down 2 semitones because I prefer it down in that lower register. It's more imposing, more aggressive, and that's the sort of sound that I want. Now we'll go to the filter. Okay, so the filter type, we're going to use a bandpass filter, and we can decide whether we're going to use 12 or 24 decibel per octave. So 12 is going to give us a kind of smaller sound. 12 is going to give us a bit larger. Cool, so we'll use 12 decibels per octave, and I'm going to boost the resonance up to around here, and I'm going to boost the drive to around there, and then let's have a play with the cutoff and see how it sounds. Cool, yep, that's sounding like we're getting towards the end goal. So next we could add a little bit of delay. So I'll turn the delay on, I'm going to bring the dry wet down. Cool, so that's adding that sort of stereo effect to it, and also the sort of time-based effect. So now we're changing the dimension of the sound. It's a bit more psytrancey. We'll add some reverb, and we'll bring it down to around 26. Maybe we can bring the size down a bit as well. Cool, sounding pretty good. Distortion, we'll turn the distortion on, we'll change it to fold back, and we're going to push that a little bit. Distortion inside of Sylenth is real nice, so let's have a listen to that. Cool. Now you'll notice that down here, there's not a lot of power, and as we sweep, there's a lot of power through this range, but then it dies out a little bit up here. So we'll use an EQ to basically smooth that out. So we'll go into the EQ, we'll turn that on, and I'm actually just going to cut all of the bass underneath 110 Hertz. Cool, and then we can boost the high frequencies to give it a bit more presence. So we'll push that up a bit. So now we're a bit more even across the frequency range as we're moving that cutoff filter. Cool. Next, we can compress it. So let's turn the compressor on, and we'll leave these settings exactly how they are because they actually work really well. So I'll just explain what's happening. So that's with it on, that's with it off. And you're going to notice that depending on what you're listening on, speakers, headphones, it should sound the same, but when the compressor's off, the sound is there. And when you turn the compressor on, it jumps forward and it's more in your face. It's essentially pulling the sound forward in the stereo field. And compressors are used for mixing. And if you're struggling to understand how compressors work, well, simply just turning that on and off and listening to the effect gives you a really good example. So the ratio is 3.8 to 1, and the threshold's negative 15 decibels. That's pretty regular. Basically, anything from like 2 to 4 ratio is pretty soft compression. It's not really that hard. And the threshold between 0 and 18 is a pretty like soft amount of threshold as well. The attack is 15 milliseconds. So what that's doing is it's actually letting the very beginning of the transient jump through when you're playing the sound, and then the release is around 15 milliseconds. So yeah, the release, whatever. You could change that. You can make it a bit shorter if you wanted. Cool. So that is the compressor, and it really brings the sound forward. Next, we could also come into the amp envelope, and we could control the shape of the sound with the amp envelope. So we can use the gate to change the note length, essentially. But we can change the shape of the sound with the amp envelope. So if I pull that all the way down, so you got nothing, and if I start pulling that up, cool, I can add a little bit of release so that we don't have any clicking on the bottom end. I'll add a bit of sustain. Let's just add a bit of body to the sound. And then on the attack, I could pull it all the way down. I can add a bit. We want a pretty sharp attack on the sound, so cool. And let's sweep it through. Cool, and then with the gate even shorter. I like the gate at around 50%. Cool, all right, so we're starting to get a pretty nice patch, and we're using a lot of the different parameters, so let's go even further. We can add a pitch envelope to the beginning of the sound so that the sound sweeps from a higher note down to that negative 2 octave. So I'm playing the note of D here. So if I add a bit of pitch modulation, it'll maybe start a note, let's say at the octave above, and then it'll slide down to the bottom octave, okay? So let's go pitch A, pitch of oscillator A is going to be controlled, and we'll just add a little bit of that. So that's just adding the envelope to the to affect the oscillator, and we'll pull that down, and let's have a listen to the sound. Let's sweep. Sweet, so it's adding a bit of, if I just turn that off. Cool, so it's adding a bit of a different, it's changing the attack essentially, because the attack is where the pitch slide is happening, and it's just changing the character of the sound slightly. Some people like that, some people don't. Sweet. And then what we could do is we could control the filter cutoff with the LFO in here. I don't really do that so much. I manually control it. But you could go cut off A, add that, add some gain, add the rate to like 4/1, and then you could just hold that down. And it just sweeps the cutoff for you. But yeah, I don't want that, so I'll just click that and turn that off. Set that back to 0. Sweet. So that's everything that I'm going to do inside of Sylenth, I think. How's that looking? Yeah, it's looking pretty good. So next, what we could do to make it more interesting is we could come in here and we could go OTT. And we could use OTT in Ableton. And we could add maybe like 70% of that. And let's have a listen. The only problem with OTT is that when you let go of the key, the compression stops acting, and it kind of makes the reverb and the delay sound a bit weird. But if you use the reverb and delay separate, like if you, instead of having them inside of Sylenth, you could add a send where you had a reverb and a delay, and the OTT wouldn't affect that. But so I'll just keep it on and we'll just deal with it. Sweet. So now what we could do is we could group these together, and we could open up the knobs, and we could map the amount of OTT to the knob, and then we could map the filter cutoff inside of Sylenth to the knob as well. So that's controlling both of the knobs. And then if we right click on the one that the parameter that we've mapped to the macro, we can come in here and we can edit the macro map. And I'm just going to make it so that when the knob is all the way at 0, the control for the cutoff is at like, let's say 0.15. Okay, so it's not going all the way to the bottom. And then when it's at all the way at the top, let's push it all the way to the top. It's somewhere around, let's just have a listen. Yeah, cool, around there. And the reason I'm doing that is because when the knob is above that point and below that point, there's not really any useful part of the sound that's playing, so it's better off just that it's not even there at all. And then for the OTT, I'm going to go from a minimum of about 20% of the effect to a maximum of like, let's say 70% of the effect. And then that way, as we open up the sound, we're getting that OTT acting even harder on the sound. So let's have a listen to what it sounds like. I'm going to hold down the note. Cool, all right, that's making a really sweet effect. And then finally, what we could do is maybe we could use like auto pan, and we could chuck that in there, and we could have that panning the sound if we wanted that. We'll decide whether we do. It's a bit schizophrenic, but we could make it a really slow rate and have it playing like 50%. Cool, and that's moving from side to side. And the sky's the limit. You could keep spicing that up, but that is how I go about making my Acid 303 sounds. And I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope that you have fun recreating that and adding your own flavor to it. And I'll see you guys in the next video.